Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that, while many manufacturing firms aim for enhanced operational efficiency, the methods employed to achieve this can vary significantly in their effectiveness and risk profile. Considering Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's commitment to quality and innovation, which of the following approaches to process optimization is most likely to yield sustainable improvements while mitigating operational risks? Option A. Prioritizing immediate cost-cutting measures by reducing material inputs or labor hours, with the expectation that efficiency gains will naturally follow. Option B. Relying on anecdotal evidence and suggestions from a limited number of senior personnel to implement changes, bypassing detailed operational analysis. Option C. Implementing a comprehensive, data-driven analysis of existing workflows to identify key performance indicators, followed by a pilot testing phase for proposed improvements before full-scale rollout. Option D. Adopting the latest available technology without extensive prior validation, based on the assumption that cutting-edge solutions inherently lead to superior efficiency. Correct answer is C. Implementing a comprehensive, data-driven analysis of existing workflows to identify key performance indicators, followed by a pilot testing phase for proposed improvements before full-scale rollout. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a global manufacturing entity, must navigate the complexities of optimizing its production processes while adhering to stringent internal quality standards and potentially varying international regulatory expectations for manufacturing efficiency and environmental impact. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process improvements that yield tangible benefits without compromising product integrity, safety, or compliance. Careful judgment is required to balance cost-effectiveness, operational feasibility, and adherence to best practices in process optimization. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a data-driven, systematic methodology. By conducting a thorough analysis of current workflows, identifying bottlenecks through objective metrics, and then piloting potential solutions, the company ensures that changes are validated before full-scale implementation. This minimizes disruption, reduces the risk of unintended negative consequences, and allows for iterative refinement. This aligns with principles of continuous improvement and responsible operational management, which are implicitly expected of a reputable firm like Sumitomo Denki Kogyo. While specific Japanese regulations are not explicitly detailed for this exam, general principles of industrial efficiency, quality control, and responsible manufacturing are universally applicable and expected. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on quality or efficiency would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a decline in product standards, increased rework, customer dissatisfaction, and potential reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing unproven technologies or methodologies without pilot testing is risky. This can result in significant financial losses, operational disruptions, and failure to achieve the desired optimization, potentially violating internal operational guidelines and best practices for risk management. A third incorrect approach that ignores employee feedback or operational realities, focusing only on theoretical improvements, is likely to face resistance and practical implementation challenges, leading to suboptimal outcomes and a failure to leverage the expertise of those directly involved in the processes. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of process optimization. This involves understanding the desired outcomes, whether they are increased throughput, reduced waste, improved quality, or enhanced safety. Next, a comprehensive assessment of the current state is crucial, utilizing data and direct observation. Potential solutions should then be brainstormed and evaluated based on feasibility, potential impact, and alignment with objectives. Pilot testing and phased implementation, coupled with continuous monitoring and feedback loops, are essential for successful and sustainable process optimization. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of process optimization initiatives. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo is considering implementing a new automated assembly line to increase production volume. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency gains with the imperative to maintain product quality and adhere to stringent manufacturing standards? Option A. Implement the new automated assembly line immediately and monitor output for any significant deviations from quality targets. Option B. Focus solely on increasing the speed of the existing manual assembly process through additional training and overtime, as this avoids the risks associated with new technology. Option C. Prioritize the fastest and most cost-effective implementation of the automated line, assuming that increased automation inherently leads to improved quality. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive pilot program on a smaller scale, rigorously testing the new line's impact on product quality, defect rates, and compliance with all relevant manufacturing standards before full deployment. Correct answer is A. Implement the new automated assembly line immediately and monitor output for any significant deviations from quality targets. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, balancing efficiency gains with potential impacts on quality and compliance. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, operating within the Japanese regulatory framework and its own internal quality management systems, must ensure that any process changes do not inadvertently lead to product defects or non-compliance with industry standards, such as those related to manufacturing precision or environmental regulations. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective optimization strategy that demonstrably improves output without compromising the integrity of the final product or violating established protocols. The correct approach emphasizes a data-driven, iterative methodology that prioritizes validation and risk assessment. This aligns with best professional practices in process engineering and quality management, which are underpinned by principles of continuous improvement and robust risk mitigation. Specifically, it reflects the Japanese emphasis on Kaizen, continuous improvement, and the stringent quality control measures expected in advanced manufacturing. Regulatory compliance is inherently addressed by ensuring that any changes are thoroughly tested and validated against existing quality benchmarks and regulatory requirements before full implementation. This approach minimizes the risk of introducing new quality issues or violating standards, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the inherent risks and regulatory implications of process optimization. One incorrect approach might focus solely on cost reduction without a commensurate evaluation of quality impact. This is professionally unacceptable as it risks product failure, customer dissatisfaction, and potential regulatory penalties for non-conforming products. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without rigorous testing. This demonstrates a failure to adhere to scientific and engineering principles, leading to unpredictable outcomes and a disregard for established quality assurance procedures, which are often mandated by industry regulations. A third incorrect approach could be to ignore potential downstream effects on other departments or processes. This siloed thinking is professionally unsound as it overlooks interdependencies, potentially creating new bottlenecks or quality issues elsewhere, and failing to meet the holistic process management expectations often embedded in regulatory frameworks. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear definition of optimization goals, followed by a comprehensive analysis of current processes, identification of potential improvement areas, and a thorough risk assessment. This should include evaluating the potential impact on quality, safety, and regulatory compliance. Proposed changes must then be subjected to rigorous testing and validation, ideally through pilot programs, before full-scale implementation. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure sustained performance and to identify any emergent issues. This systematic approach ensures that optimization efforts are both effective and responsible, aligning with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 3. To address the challenge of a recurring quality deviation in a critical manufacturing process, which of the following approaches best exemplifies a commitment to efficient and effective process optimization? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of historical process data, observe the current operation to identify anomalies, and then formulate a hypothesis for the root cause to be tested through controlled experimentation. Option B. Immediately implement a significant modification to a key process parameter based on a recent observation of a minor defect, without further investigation. Option C. Rely exclusively on the anecdotal feedback from long-serving production staff to guide immediate process adjustments. Option D. Halt all production for an extended period to conduct a comprehensive, unfocused review of every aspect of the manufacturing line. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of historical process data, observe the current operation to identify anomalies, and then formulate a hypothesis for the root cause to be tested through controlled experimentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in manufacturing environments where maintaining optimal process efficiency is crucial for both productivity and quality. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of a recurring quality deviation without disrupting ongoing production unnecessarily. A hasty or misdirected approach can lead to wasted resources, prolonged downtime, and potential customer dissatisfaction, all of which have significant business implications. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for thorough investigation with the imperative of operational continuity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes understanding the process before implementing changes. This aligns with best professional practices in process optimization, which emphasize root cause analysis and evidence-based decision-making. By first gathering detailed process data and observing the operation, a comprehensive understanding of the current state is established. This allows for the identification of potential contributing factors to the quality deviation. Subsequently, a targeted, controlled experiment can be designed to test hypotheses about the root cause. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of introducing new problems or making ineffective adjustments, thereby ensuring sustainable improvements and adherence to quality standards expected in the industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing a significant process change based on anecdotal evidence or a single observed anomaly. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the critical step of root cause analysis. Such an action risks addressing a symptom rather than the underlying problem, potentially leading to wasted effort, increased costs, and the possibility of creating new quality issues. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for systematic problem solving. Another incorrect approach is to halt production entirely to conduct an exhaustive, unfocused investigation. While thoroughness is important, an immediate and complete shutdown without a clear understanding of the problem's severity or potential causes is often an overreaction. This can lead to significant financial losses due to lost production time, and may not even guarantee the identification of the true root cause if the investigation is not properly directed. It represents poor resource management and a failure to balance operational needs with investigative requirements. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the opinions of experienced operators without corroborating this with objective data. While operator insights are valuable, they can be subjective and may not always reflect the complete picture of process dynamics. Making critical process adjustments based purely on opinion without data validation can lead to misdiagnosis and ineffective solutions, undermining the principles of data-driven decision-making that are fundamental to effective process optimization. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a challenge should employ a structured problem-solving framework. This typically involves 1. Defining the problem clearly, including the specific quality deviation and its impact. 2. Gathering data to understand the current process performance and identify potential areas of concern. 3. Analyzing the data to pinpoint the most probable root cause. 4. Developing and testing potential solutions in a controlled manner. 5. Implementing the validated solution and monitoring its effectiveness. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, efficient, and lead to sustainable improvements, aligning with professional standards of care and operational excellence. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new automated quality control system could significantly reduce production defects and labor costs. However, the system's data logging capabilities are not fully compliant with current industry data retention standards, and its integration requires a temporary bypass of a minor safety interlock during initial setup. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Conduct a pilot program for the new system in a controlled environment, ensuring full compliance with data retention standards, and implementing the safety interlock bypass only after thorough risk assessment and obtaining necessary internal approvals, with a plan for immediate remediation of any identified compliance gaps. Option B. Delay the implementation of the new system indefinitely until a fully compliant and risk-free version can be developed, even if it means foregoing the potential cost savings and defect reduction. Option C. Proceed with the implementation of the new system, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and defect reduction, and address the data compliance and safety interlock issues in a subsequent, less urgent phase. Option D. Implement the new system immediately, assuming that the data compliance issues are minor and will be overlooked by regulators, and that the safety interlock bypass is a standard temporary measure in such implementations. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the implementation of the new system, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and defect reduction, and address the data compliance and safety interlock issues in a subsequent, less urgent phase. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, balancing the immediate benefits of a proposed improvement against potential long-term risks and compliance requirements. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, operating within a regulated industry, must prioritize not only efficiency gains, but also adherence to established legal and ethical standards. The professional challenge lies in discerning which optimization strategy aligns with both operational excellence and regulatory integrity, especially when faced with pressures to demonstrate quick returns on investment. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough, phased implementation that includes rigorous testing and validation within the existing regulatory framework. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation, ensuring that any process changes do not inadvertently lead to non-compliance or ethical breaches. By systematically evaluating the impact on quality, safety, and data integrity, and seeking necessary approvals, this method upholds Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's reputation and mitigates legal and financial risks. This aligns with the general principles of good corporate governance and operational risk management expected in any reputable organization, particularly those in manufacturing and technology sectors. An incorrect approach that bypasses established validation protocols or regulatory review poses significant risks. Such an approach could lead to the introduction of defects, compromise product quality, or violate data privacy regulations, resulting in substantial fines, reputational damage, and potential legal action. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on employee well-being or ethical labor practices would be a direct violation of labor laws and ethical codes of conduct, leading to employee dissatisfaction, increased turnover, and potential legal challenges. A third incorrect approach that prematurely scales a new process without adequate pilot testing risks widespread operational disruption and failure to achieve the intended benefits, potentially leading to financial losses and a loss of confidence in the optimization initiative. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives, followed by a comprehensive assessment of potential impacts, including regulatory, ethical, and operational considerations. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, external regulations, and seeking expert advice where necessary. A phased approach, incorporating risk assessment and mitigation strategies at each stage, is crucial for making informed decisions that balance efficiency with compliance and ethical responsibility. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current onboarding process for new hires is perceived as lengthy and administratively burdensome. To streamline this, a proposal has been made to significantly reduce the number of mandatory compliance training modules and to automate the collection of certain personal data points without a full review of their necessity or the associated data protection implications. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial step in addressing this feedback while adhering to best practices for process optimization within the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo hiring assessment test framework? Option A. Prioritize the automation of data collection to reduce administrative burden, assuming that compliance training can be addressed in a separate future initiative. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the existing onboarding process, mapping each step, identifying bottlenecks, and cross-referencing all compliance training and data collection points against the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo hiring assessment tests implied standards for responsible hiring and data handling. Option C. Immediately implement the proposed changes to reduce compliance training and automate data collection, as stakeholder feedback suggests a clear need for speed and efficiency. Option D. Focus solely on reducing the number of compliance training modules, as this is a direct response to the feedback about the process being burdensome. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the existing onboarding process, mapping each step, identifying bottlenecks and cross-referencing all compliance training and data collection points against the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo hiring assessment tests, implied standards for responsible hiring and data handling. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where immediate cost savings are prioritized over long-term sustainability and compliance. The pressure to demonstrate quick wins can lead to overlooking critical regulatory requirements and ethical considerations, potentially exposing Sumitomo Denki Kogyo to significant risks. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with adherence to the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo hiring assessment tests implicit framework, which emphasizes responsible and compliant business practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of existing processes against the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo hiring assessment tests guidelines, focusing on identifying inefficiencies that can be addressed without compromising compliance or ethical standards. This demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a holistic view of process improvement, which includes regulatory adherence, risk mitigation, and sustainable operational gains. It aligns with the implicit expectation within a hiring assessment to showcase a candidate's understanding of responsible business conduct and their ability to implement changes that are both effective and compliant. This approach ensures that any proposed optimizations are robust, defensible, and do not introduce new vulnerabilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or without a systematic review risks overlooking critical compliance requirements. This could lead to violations of internal policies or external regulations that are not explicitly stated, but are understood to be part of the operational framework being assessed. For example, a process change that inadvertently increases data privacy risks or bypasses necessary quality control checks would be a significant ethical and potentially regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on cost reduction, without considering the impact on the quality of output or the potential for increased errors, which could indirectly lead to non-compliance or reputational damage. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to consider the broader implications of process changes, which is professionally unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with process optimization opportunities should adopt a structured decision-making process. This begins with clearly defining the objectives, which should always include compliance and ethical considerations alongside efficiency and cost. Next, a comprehensive assessment of the current state is necessary, involving data gathering and stakeholder consultation. Potential solutions should then be evaluated not only for their efficiency gains, but also for their impact on compliance, risk, and ethical implications. Finally, implementation should be phased with continuous monitoring and feedback loops to ensure that the optimized process remains effective and compliant. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, responsible, and aligned with the organization's overall objectives and values. Question 6. The audit findings indicate a persistent bottleneck in the order processing and dispatch workflow, leading to an average delay of 2 business days in customer deliveries. This has resulted in an increase in customer complaints regarding late shipments. Considering the need for efficient and cost-effective operational improvements, which of the following actions would be the most appropriate initial step to address this issue? Option A. Rely on the experience of the longest-serving warehouse supervisor to pinpoint the primary cause of the delays. Option B. Immediately authorize overtime for the dispatch team to expedite the processing of pending orders. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive process mapping exercise of the entire order fulfillment lifecycle from order placement to final dispatch to identify specific points of delay and their root causes. Option D. Implement a new, advanced order management software system to streamline operations. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive process mapping exercise of the entire order fulfillment lifecycle from order placement to final dispatch to identify specific points of delay and their root causes. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a recurring bottleneck in the order fulfillment process, leading to delays and customer dissatisfaction. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only identifying the root cause of the inefficiency, but also proposing a solution that aligns with Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's operational standards and potentially any relevant industry best practices or internal guidelines that govern process optimization. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly while maintaining quality and cost-effectiveness adds to the complexity. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven analysis of the entire order fulfillment workflow. This means mapping out each step, identifying points of delay or error, and then evaluating potential solutions based on their impact on efficiency, cost, and customer satisfaction. This methodical approach is best professional practice because it ensures that solutions are targeted, sustainable, and have a measurable positive outcome. It aligns with principles of continuous improvement and operational excellence, which are crucial for maintaining competitiveness and customer trust. While specific Sumitomo Denki Kogyo internal guidelines would be paramount, a general best practice would be to leverage Lean or Six Sigma methodologies, focusing on eliminating waste and reducing variation. An incorrect approach would be to implement a quick fix without understanding the underlying problem. For example, simply increasing staffing at one stage without analyzing if that stage is truly the bottleneck would be inefficient and potentially costly. This could lead to misallocation of resources and might not address the core issue, potentially violating internal directives on resource management and operational efficiency. Another incorrect approach would be to adopt a solution based solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single team member, without validating it through data or a pilot program. This bypasses the due diligence required for effective process optimization and could lead to implementing a solution that is ineffective or even detrimental, potentially contravening internal policies on evidence-based decision-making. A third incorrect approach might be to focus on a solution that significantly increases costs without a clear return on investment, which would likely violate financial stewardship principles and internal budgetary guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Problem definition. Clearly articulate the issue and its impact. 2. Data gathering. Collect relevant data to understand the current process and identify root causes. 3. Solution generation. Brainstorm multiple potential solutions. 4. Solution evaluation. Assess each solution against defined criteria: efficiency, cost, impact, feasibility. 5. Implementation and monitoring. Select the best solution, implement it, and track its performance. 6. Continuous improvement. Regularly review and refine processes. Question 7. Consider a scenario where a Sumitomo Denki Kogyo manufacturing facility in Japan has inadvertently released a chemical byproduct into a nearby river, exceeding permissible discharge limits. Local environmental advocacy groups have raised concerns about the potential long-term ecological damage and the impact on the local fishing community. The company's internal assessment suggests that immediate remediation costs could be substantial, potentially impacting quarterly profits. From a stakeholder perspective, what is the most professionally responsible course of action for Sumitomo Denki Kogyo? Option A. Prioritize internal efforts to quickly contain the spill and clean up the immediate visible evidence, while delaying public disclosure and engagement with external stakeholders until a complete internal investigation is finalized, regardless of the timeline. Option B. Focus solely on implementing the minimum required remediation steps as dictated by Japanese environmental law, without engaging in further consultation or exceeding the legally mandated actions to control costs. Option C. Issue a public statement acknowledging a minor incident, emphasizing that internal tests show no significant long-term harm, and offer a modest community goodwill fund to mitigate immediate concerns without committing to extensive remediation. Option D. Proactively engage with local environmental groups and relevant Japanese environmental regulatory bodies to transparently share the findings of the internal assessment and collaboratively develop a comprehensive remediation and long-term monitoring plan. The correct answer is D. Proactively engage with local environmental groups and relevant Japanese environmental regulatory bodies to transparently share the findings of the internal assessment and collaboratively develop a comprehensive remediation and long-term monitoring plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its stakeholders, particularly concerning environmental impact. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a responsible corporate entity, must navigate the complexities of balancing profitability with its duty of care towards the environment and the communities it operates within. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing stakeholder interests, especially when those interests appear to be in direct opposition. The correct approach, which involves proactively engaging with local environmental groups and regulatory bodies to develop a comprehensive remediation plan, represents best professional practice. This aligns with principles of corporate social responsibility and good corporate governance, which are increasingly emphasized in regulatory frameworks and industry best practices. By taking a transparent and collaborative stance, Sumitomo Denki Kogyo demonstrates a commitment to environmental stewardship, builds trust with stakeholders, and mitigates potential future legal and reputational risks. This proactive engagement is often a requirement or strong recommendation under environmental regulations that mandate impact assessments and community consultation. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost savings by downplaying the environmental impact and delaying remediation efforts. This failure would violate ethical principles of honesty and transparency, and potentially contravene specific environmental regulations that require timely reporting and action on pollution incidents. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on internal assessments without external validation or consultation, which could lead to an incomplete understanding of the environmental damage and a failure to meet regulatory standards for independent verification. This neglects the stakeholder perspective, particularly the concerns of the local community and environmental watchdogs, and could be seen as a breach of due diligence. A third incorrect approach might be to offer a minimal compensation package to affected parties without addressing the root cause of the pollution, which fails to demonstrate a genuine commitment to environmental responsibility and could lead to further legal challenges and reputational damage. Professionals should approach such situations by first conducting a thorough and objective assessment of the environmental impact, involving independent experts where necessary. This should be followed by a comprehensive stakeholder analysis to understand the concerns and expectations of all relevant parties, including regulators, local communities, employees, and shareholders. A decision-making framework should then prioritize actions that are not only legally compliant, but also ethically sound and aligned with long-term sustainability goals. Open communication, transparency, and a willingness to collaborate on solutions are crucial for building trust and ensuring responsible corporate behavior. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that a senior executive at Sumitomo Denki Kogyo has recently acquired a significant personal stake in a company that is a direct competitor to one of Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's key strategic suppliers. This executive is a member of the committee responsible for evaluating and approving new supplier contracts. What is the most appropriate course of action for Sumitomo Denki Kogyo to take in this situation? Option A. The executive should continue to participate in the supplier evaluation committee, but be instructed to remain objective and consider only the best interests of Sumitomo Denki Kogyo. Option B. The executive should be asked to divest their personal stake in the competing company to resolve the conflict before continuing their committee duties. Option C. The executive must immediately disclose their personal investment to the board of directors and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions related to the strategic supplier in question, and potentially other suppliers where a conflict could arise. Option D. The company should wait to see if the executive's investment influences any supplier decisions before taking any action, to avoid unnecessary disruption. The correct answer is C. The executive must immediately disclose their personal investment to the board of directors and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions related to the strategic supplier in question, and potentially other suppliers where a conflict could arise. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a publicly listed company, is facing a potential conflict of interest involving a key executive and a supplier. The challenge lies in balancing the company's fiduciary duties to its shareholders with the need to maintain robust supplier relationships and ensure fair dealing. The executive's personal investment in a competing supplier creates a situation where their professional judgment could be compromised, potentially leading to decisions that benefit the executive personally rather than the company. This requires careful navigation to uphold corporate governance principles and regulatory compliance. The correct approach, which involves immediate disclosure of the conflict and recusal from relevant decision-making processes, represents best professional practice. This aligns with fundamental principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of listed companies. Specifically, It adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations governing disclosure of interests and the prevention of insider dealing or market abuse, ensuring transparency and fairness in business dealings. By proactively addressing the conflict, the company safeguards its reputation and demonstrates a commitment to acting in the best interests of all stakeholders, including shareholders and the market. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying the significance of the executive's investment and continuing to allow their involvement in supplier selection would constitute a serious regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of good corporate governance, potentially leading to breaches of fiduciary duty and an unfair competitive environment. Such an action could be interpreted as a failure to implement adequate internal controls to prevent conflicts of interest, which is a key expectation under many regulatory frameworks for listed entities. Furthermore, it could expose the company to accusations of market manipulation or unfair trading practices if the executive's undisclosed interest influenced procurement decisions. Another incorrect approach, such as terminating the executive's employment without a thorough investigation or due process, could also be professionally problematic. While addressing the conflict is paramount, hasty actions without proper investigation might lead to legal challenges and damage employee morale. It fails to follow a structured, fair, and transparent process for conflict resolution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identification. Recognize and identify potential or actual conflicts of interest. 2. Disclosure. Ensure prompt and full disclosure of the conflict by the involved party. 3. Assessment. Evaluate the nature and severity of the conflict and its potential impact. 4. Mitigation. Implement appropriate measures to manage or eliminate the conflict, such as recusal, divestment, or independent oversight. 5. Documentation. Maintain clear records of the conflict, the assessment, and the actions taken. 6. Review. Periodically review policies and procedures related to conflicts of interest to ensure their effectiveness. This systematic approach ensures that conflicts are handled transparently, ethically, and in compliance with all applicable regulations, thereby protecting the company and its stakeholders. Question 9. Upon reviewing the latest environmental monitoring report, Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's engineering team has identified a potential exceedance of permitted emissions levels at one of its manufacturing facilities. The exceedance is minor and has not yet resulted in any direct harm or regulatory notice, but it indicates a deviation from compliance standards. The finance department is concerned about the immediate costs associated with investigating the root cause and implementing corrective actions, which could impact quarterly earnings. How should the company's leadership prioritize its response to this situation? Option A. Focus solely on the financial implications, exploring ways to minimize the cost of any potential remediation without prioritizing a thorough investigation or proactive regulatory engagement. Option B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive investigation into the emissions exceedance. Engage with environmental regulators to discuss findings and remediation plans, and communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders about the situation and the company's commitment to resolving it. Option C. Attempt to find loopholes in the environmental regulations that might allow for the current emissions levels to be considered acceptable, thereby avoiding any corrective actions or reporting. Option D. Delay reporting the exceedance to regulators and conduct a minimal internal investigation to assess if the issue resolves itself naturally, to avoid immediate financial impact and potential regulatory scrutiny. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive investigation into the emissions exceedance. Engage with environmental regulators to discuss findings and remediation plans, and communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders about the situation and the company's commitment to resolving it. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its stakeholders, particularly concerning environmental impact. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a publicly traded entity, operates under a framework that demands transparency and responsible corporate citizenship. The challenge lies in balancing the pressure to achieve short-term profit targets with the imperative to invest in and implement environmentally sound practices that may incur upfront costs but yield long-term benefits and mitigate future risks. The correct approach, which prioritizes a proactive and transparent engagement with environmental regulators and stakeholders regarding the identified emissions issue represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and good governance, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory expectations. By acknowledging the issue, proposing a remediation plan, and seeking collaborative solutions, the company demonstrates a commitment to compliance and ethical conduct. This approach fosters trust with regulators, investors, and the public, safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term sustainability. It also preempts potential penalties and reputational damage that could arise from a delayed or concealed response. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying the severity of the emissions and delaying reporting to regulators would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of transparency and potentially breach reporting obligations under relevant environmental laws. Such a delay could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal noncompliance, leading to severe penalties, legal action, and irreparable damage to the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which focuses solely on the immediate cost of remediation without considering the broader stakeholder impact or regulatory requirements, demonstrates a myopic view of business operations. This neglects the ethical duty to minimize environmental harm and could lead to future liabilities and stakeholder dissatisfaction. A third incorrect approach, which involves seeking to influence regulatory decisions through undue pressure rather than open dialogue, is ethically unsound and could lead to accusations of corruption or regulatory capture, undermining the integrity of the regulatory process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape and ethical principles. This involves identifying all affected stakeholders and assessing the potential impact of different courses of action on each group. A critical step is to seek expert advice, both legal and technical, to fully comprehend the implications of the situation. The decision-making process should then involve evaluating options based on their adherence to legal requirements, ethical standards, and long-term business sustainability, rather than solely on short-term financial considerations. Open communication and transparency with all relevant parties are paramount throughout this process. Question 10. Operational review demonstrates that a new manufacturing process at Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's overseas subsidiary has a potential for increased emissions of a regulated pollutant, though current monitoring suggests it remains within permissible limits. However, internal projections indicate that a minor process adjustment, which would incur a moderate upfront cost, could significantly reduce these emissions and potentially exceed future, more stringent regulatory thresholds. Management is debating whether to implement the adjustment immediately, given the current compliance status and the associated cost, or to defer it until regulatory changes are imminent. From a stakeholder perspective, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Defer the process adjustment, as the current emissions are within legal limits, and focus resources on immediate production targets to maximize short-term profitability for shareholders. Option B. Lobby regulatory bodies to delay the implementation of stricter emission standards, citing the current compliance of the subsidiary and the economic burden of immediate adjustments. Option C. Conduct a limited, internal assessment of the potential future regulatory changes and only implement the adjustment if the probability of immediate enforcement of stricter limits is deemed very high. Option D. Proactively implement the process adjustment to ensure compliance with anticipated future regulations and demonstrate a commitment to environmental stewardship, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term operational viability. The correct answer is D. Proactively implement the process adjustment to ensure compliance with anticipated future regulations and demonstrate a commitment to environmental stewardship, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and long-term operational viability. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations towards its stakeholders, particularly in the context of environmental, social, and governance-esque considerations. The pressure to meet short-term performance targets can incentivize overlooking or downplaying potential negative impacts, requiring careful judgment to balance competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, accountability, and proactive engagement with all relevant stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which are increasingly codified in regulatory frameworks and expected by investors and the public. By conducting a thorough, independent assessment and communicating findings openly, the company demonstrates a commitment to ethical operations and sustainable practices, thereby building trust and mitigating long-term reputational and legal risks. This proactive stance is often mandated or strongly encouraged by regulations governing corporate disclosure and environmental impact. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the environmental impact fails to adhere to environmental protection regulations and ethical principles of corporate social responsibility. Such an approach could lead to non-compliance with environmental laws, resulting in fines, legal action, and significant reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate shareholder returns by suppressing negative findings ignores the broader stakeholder interests, including those of the local community and future generations, and can violate disclosure requirements and fiduciary duties that extend beyond mere profit maximization. A third incorrect approach that delays or obfuscates the reporting of findings, hoping the issue will resolve itself or be overlooked, demonstrates a lack of integrity and can be considered a breach of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory reporting obligations, leading to severe consequences if discovered. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of all applicable regulations and ethical codes. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests, assessing potential impacts, both positive and negative, of proposed actions, and evaluating these impacts against regulatory requirements and ethical standards. Transparency, open communication, and a commitment to finding sustainable solutions that balance diverse stakeholder needs should guide the decision-making process. When conflicts arise, prioritizing compliance, ethical conduct, and long-term sustainability over short-term gains is crucial for professional integrity and the company's enduring success. Question 11. Examination of the data shows that a new manufacturing process at a Sumitomo Denki Kogyo facility has the potential for increased wastewater discharge containing trace amounts of a novel chemical compound. While initial internal assessments suggest the compound is unlikely to pose significant immediate health risks at projected discharge levels, a comprehensive, independent environmental impact study has not yet been completed. The project team is eager to proceed with the new process to meet increased market demand and has proposed a preliminary monitoring plan based on the internal assessment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's commitment to regulatory compliance and stakeholder responsibility in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the new manufacturing process after implementing the proposed preliminary monitoring plan and commit to conducting a full environmental impact assessment within the next fiscal year. Option B. Implement the new manufacturing process immediately to capitalize on market demand and rely on the company's established environmental management systems to address any potential issues as they emerge, without requiring an upfront independent assessment. Option C. Halt the implementation of the new manufacturing process until a thorough, independent environmental impact assessment is completed and reviewed by relevant regulatory authorities, ensuring full transparency with affected communities regarding the potential risks and mitigation strategies. Option D. Obtain regulatory approval based on the internal assessment and the preliminary monitoring plan, with a commitment to address any unforeseen environmental issues that may arise post-implementation. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the new manufacturing process after implementing the proposed preliminary monitoring plan and commit to conducting a full environmental impact assessment within the next fiscal year. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its stakeholders, particularly concerning environmental impact. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a responsible corporate entity, must navigate the complex landscape of environmental regulations and stakeholder expectations. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the cost-effectiveness of a proposed solution with its potential environmental consequences and the transparency required in reporting to regulatory bodies and the public. The correct approach, which prioritizes a comprehensive, independent environmental impact assessment and transparent communication with regulatory bodies and affected communities represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and good governance, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory frameworks. Such an approach ensures compliance with environmental laws, fosters trust among stakeholders, and mitigates long-term reputational and legal risks. It demonstrates a commitment to sustainable operations and proactive risk management, which are crucial for a company of Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's stature. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying potential environmental risks to expedite project approval or reduce immediate costs would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to violations of environmental protection laws, resulting in fines, legal action, and severe reputational damage. Furthermore, withholding or misrepresenting critical environmental data to regulatory agencies is a direct breach of trust and a violation of disclosure requirements. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on internal cost-benefit analysis without adequate consideration of external environmental impacts and stakeholder concerns, demonstrates a narrow and potentially harmful business perspective. This neglects the broader societal responsibilities of a corporation and can lead to unforeseen liabilities and public backlash. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulations and legal requirements. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of potential impacts, involving independent experts where necessary. Open and honest communication with all relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local communities, and investors, is paramount. The decision-making process should be guided by ethical principles, prioritizing long-term sustainability and corporate responsibility over short-term gains. A proactive and transparent approach, even if it incurs higher initial costs, ultimately safeguards the company's reputation and ensures its license to operate. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that while Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's new advanced materials technology is progressing according to its long-term strategic roadmap, its initial impact on immediate profitability is less pronounced than anticipated, leading to some concern from a key investment fund focused on quarterly returns. How should Sumitomo Denki Kogyo best address this situation with the investment fund? Option A. Provide a detailed presentation to the investment fund outlining the phased rollout plan for the new technology, the projected long-term market advantages, and the specific milestones for future profitability, while acknowledging the current short-term performance and reiterating the strategic importance of the investment. Option B. Immediately adjust the reporting metrics to emphasize the positive aspects of the technology's development, downplaying the current impact on profitability to alleviate the investment fund's immediate concerns. Option C. Inform the investment fund that their focus on short-term profitability is misaligned with the company's long-term strategic vision, and that they should reconsider their investment if they cannot accept this. Option D. Agree to a significant reduction in the R&D budget for the new technology to demonstrate a commitment to improving short-term financial performance, even if it means slowing down the strategic rollout. The correct answer is A. Provide a detailed presentation to the investment fund outlining the phased rollout plan for the new technology, the projected long-term market advantages, and the specific milestones for future profitability, while acknowledging the current short-term performance and reiterating the strategic importance of the investment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from conflicting stakeholder interests and the potential for misinterpretation of performance metrics. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate financial pressures of the investment fund with the long-term strategic goals of Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, particularly when those goals involve significant upfront investment and potentially delayed returns. The need for transparency and accurate communication with all stakeholders, especially those with differing time horizons and risk appetites, is paramount. Mismanaging these expectations can lead to reputational damage, loss of investor confidence, and strained relationships. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive and nuanced communication strategy that acknowledges the investment fund's short-term performance concerns, while clearly articulating the long-term strategic rationale and expected benefits of the new technology. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and stakeholder engagement, which emphasize transparency, fairness, and the responsible management of expectations. By providing context, outlining the phased rollout, and detailing the projected long-term value creation, Sumitomo Denki Kogyo demonstrates a commitment to its strategic vision and its investors' ultimate interests, even if short-term fluctuations are present. This approach fosters trust and understanding, crucial for sustained support. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the short-term financial performance, dismissing the investment fund's concerns as short-sighted. This fails to acknowledge the legitimate role of investors in monitoring performance and can be perceived as dismissive and arrogant, potentially leading to a withdrawal of support or increased scrutiny. It neglects the ethical obligation to communicate effectively with all stakeholders and can damage the company's reputation for transparency. Another incorrect approach would be to overpromise immediate returns from the new technology to placate the investment fund, without a realistic basis. This constitutes a misrepresentation of facts and can lead to significant ethical and regulatory breaches if the promised returns do not materialize. It erodes trust and can have severe legal and financial repercussions. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the investment fund's concerns altogether, assuming that the strategic importance of the technology overrides any financial performance issues. This demonstrates a lack of respect for investor input and can be seen as a failure in corporate governance. It also misses an opportunity to gain valuable feedback and potentially refine the implementation strategy based on investor perspectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a balanced and proactive approach to stakeholder communication. This involves understanding the diverse needs and expectations of each stakeholder group, clearly articulating the company's strategy and its rationale, and managing expectations realistically. When faced with conflicting interests, professionals should seek to find common ground, emphasize long-term value creation, and maintain open and honest dialogue. A robust communication plan that addresses potential concerns before they escalate is a hallmark of effective leadership and responsible corporate citizenship. Question 13. System analysis indicates that Sumitomo Denki Kogyo is seeking significant investment for a groundbreaking new technology project. While the project holds immense future potential, the company's current financial performance has been weaker than anticipated due to unforeseen market shifts. Management is concerned that disclosing the current financial challenges might deter potential investors from participating in the upcoming funding round. Which approach best balances the company's need for capital with its ethical and regulatory obligations to stakeholders? Option A. Provide only optimistic projections for the new project and use vague, generalized statements about current financial performance to avoid deterring investors. Option B. Proactively communicate the current financial performance, including the challenges and the strategies being implemented to address them, alongside the optimistic outlook for the new project, to all potential and existing investors. Option C. Delay the disclosure of the current financial performance issues until after the investment round is successfully closed, focusing all communications on the potential of the new technology. Option D. Focus communications exclusively on the positive aspects of the new project and suggest that current financial performance is not a significant factor in evaluating the investment opportunity. Correct answer is B. Proactively communicate the current financial performance, including the challenges and the strategies being implemented to address them, alongside the optimistic outlook for the new project, to all potential and existing investors. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from the inherent conflict between a company's strategic objectives and the ethical obligations owed to its stakeholders, particularly in the context of financial reporting and investor relations. The pressure to present a favorable financial outlook, driven by the desire to attract investment for a critical new project, can create a temptation to misrepresent or selectively disclose information. This requires careful judgment to balance business imperatives with the fundamental principles of transparency and fairness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes proactive and transparent communication with all relevant stakeholders, including existing and potential investors, regarding the company's financial performance and future prospects. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the regulatory expectations for publicly listed companies. Specifically, it upholds the duty to provide accurate and timely information, preventing misleading impressions. This approach fosters trust, maintains market integrity, and ensures compliance with disclosure requirements, which are paramount in maintaining investor confidence and facilitating sustainable capital raising. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying the disclosure of negative financial performance until after the investment round is secured. This constitutes a material omission and a misrepresentation of the company's financial health to potential investors, violating principles of fair dealing and potentially breaching securities regulations that mandate timely disclosure of material information. It creates an unfair advantage for the company and disadvantages investors who make decisions based on incomplete or misleading data. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on optimistic projections for the new project, while downplaying current financial weaknesses. This selective disclosure, while not an outright lie, creates a misleading picture by omitting crucial context. It violates the ethical obligation to provide a balanced view and can be considered a form of misrepresentation if the current performance significantly impacts the viability or risk profile of the future project. Regulatory frameworks often require disclosure of both positive and negative material factors that could influence investment decisions. A third incorrect approach is to provide vague and generalized statements about financial performance without concrete details, hoping to satisfy disclosure requirements without revealing unfavorable information. This lack of specificity can be interpreted as an attempt to obscure the truth and can lead to investor confusion and a loss of confidence. It fails to meet the spirit of transparency and can be seen as a deliberate effort to mislead stakeholders. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant stakeholders and their information needs. 2. Understanding the company's disclosure obligations under applicable laws and regulations. 3. Assessing the materiality of all financial information, both positive and negative. 4. Developing a communication strategy that is transparent, accurate, and timely. 5. Seeking legal and compliance advice when in doubt about disclosure requirements or potential conflicts. 6. Maintaining a commitment to integrity and fairness in all interactions with stakeholders. Question 14. Analysis of a situation where a key supplier requests an unusual, expedited payment for services rendered, citing an urgent operational need that deviates from standard contractual terms. The project timeline is extremely tight, and delaying the payment could jeopardize a critical delivery deadline. The request is accompanied by a verbal assurance of its legitimacy from a mid-level contact within the supplier's organization. Option A. Immediately approve the expedited payment to ensure the project deadline is met, relying on the verbal assurance and the urgency of the situation. Option B. Process the payment as a standard transaction, assuming the supplier's request is valid and the urgency is genuine. Option C. Inform the supplier that the request cannot be accommodated due to contractual terms and advise them to follow the standard payment procedure. Option D. Escalate the request to the legal and compliance departments for review and guidance before any payment is processed, regardless of the project timeline. The correct answer is A. Immediately approve the expedited payment to ensure the project deadline is met, relying on the verbal assurance and the urgency of the situation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial pressures of a project with long-term ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The decision-maker must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that all actions align with Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's internal policies and relevant Japanese regulations governing business conduct and financial reporting. The urgency of the project deadline can create pressure to overlook or rationalize potentially problematic actions, making a structured decision-making framework essential. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes thorough due diligence and adherence to established procedures. By seeking clarification from the legal department and consulting internal compliance guidelines, the decision-maker demonstrates a commitment to upholding ethical standards and regulatory requirements. This proactive engagement ensures that any potential risks are identified and mitigated before they escalate, safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. This aligns with the principles of corporate governance and responsible business operations expected under Japanese law and Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's internal framework. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the supplier payment without further investigation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established internal controls designed to prevent fraud, corruption, and noncompliance with anti-bribery laws. It could expose the company to severe penalties, reputational damage, and legal action. Another incorrect approach, such as accepting the supplier's explanation at face value without independent verification, demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to exercise due diligence. This could lead to the company inadvertently engaging in unethical or illegal activities, such as facilitating illicit payments or violating procurement regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue and potential risks. This should be followed by gathering all relevant facts, consulting applicable policies, regulations, and seeking expert advice, e.g., legal compliance. Evaluating the potential consequences of each course of action, considering both short-term and long-term impacts, is crucial. Finally, selecting the option that best aligns with ethical principles, regulatory requirements, and the company's values, and documenting the decision-making process is paramount. Question 15. The efficiency study reveals significant potential cost savings by streamlining the quality assurance process, but this may involve reducing the frequency of certain material inspections and relying more heavily on supplier certifications. Option A. Delegate the decision-making authority to the operations manager responsible for cost reduction, trusting their judgment to balance efficiency with quality without further consultation or formal review. Option B. Proceed with reducing inspections based on the efficiency study's findings, with the understanding that any quality issues that arise will be addressed reactively as they occur, prioritizing immediate financial gains. Option C. Immediately implement the proposed changes to realize the cost savings, assuming that supplier certifications are inherently reliable and that any minor deviations in quality will be manageable through customer service. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes potential impacts on product quality, customer satisfaction, and regulatory compliance, consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure adherence to all relevant Sumitomo Denki Kogyo guidelines and any applicable industry regulations before proposing any changes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes potential impacts on product quality, customer satisfaction, and regulatory compliance, consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure adherence to all relevant Sumitomo Denki Kogyo guidelines and any applicable industry regulations before proposing any changes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications of compromising quality and potentially violating regulatory standards. The pressure to meet financial targets can lead to hasty decisions that overlook critical compliance and ethical considerations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any efficiency measures are sustainable and do not expose Sumitomo Denki Kogyo to legal repercussions or reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven evaluation of all potential impacts before implementing changes. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, industry best practices, and, crucially, the regulatory framework governing Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's operations. Adhering to established decision-making frameworks ensures that all stakeholders' interests are considered and that decisions are defensible and compliant. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which are implicitly expected in any professional setting, especially within a large, established corporation like Sumitomo Denki Kogyo. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering the impact on product quality or regulatory compliance is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to breaches of product safety standards, misrepresentation of product capabilities, or failure to meet reporting requirements, all of which carry significant legal and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established internal review processes or seeking shortcuts to approval demonstrates a disregard for corporate governance and internal controls, increasing the risk of errors and noncompliance. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data and expert consultation is inherently flawed, leading to decisions that are not robust or defensible. These failures can result in regulatory sanctions, loss of customer trust, and damage to the company's reputation. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes 1. Clearly defining the problem and objectives. 2. Gathering relevant information, including regulatory requirements and potential impacts. 3. Identifying and evaluating alternative solutions. 4. Selecting the best course of action based on a comprehensive assessment of risks, benefits, and compliance. And 5. Implementing and monitoring the chosen solution. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, ethical, and compliant with all applicable laws and guidelines. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that candidates are expected to demonstrate sound judgment when handling sensitive information. During a simulated hiring assessment, a candidate is asked to provide specific details about a past project that, if disclosed, could inadvertently reveal proprietary client data. The candidate is under pressure to provide a comprehensive answer to impress the assessors. Option A. The candidate should refuse to answer the question altogether, citing privacy concerns without offering any alternative way to demonstrate their project experience. Option B. The candidate should attempt to recall and provide the information, hoping that the assessors will not notice any potential breaches of confidentiality. Option C. The candidate should politely explain that while they are eager to share their experience, they are bound by confidentiality agreements and cannot disclose specific client project details. They should offer to discuss the project in general terms, focusing on the skills and methodologies used, without revealing any proprietary information. Option D. The candidate should provide the requested details, assuming that the hiring assessment context implies a waiver of confidentiality for the purpose of evaluation. The correct answer is C. The candidate should politely explain that while they are eager to share their experience, they are bound by confidentiality agreements and cannot disclose specific client project details. They should offer to discuss the project in general terms, focusing on the skills and methodologies used, without revealing any proprietary information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect client confidentiality and data integrity. The pressure to provide a quick response, especially in a competitive hiring context, can lead to shortcuts that violate these principles. Careful judgment is required to navigate the competing demands of efficiency and compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Sumitomo Denki, Kogyo's internal policies, and relevant data protection regulations. By seeking clarification through official channels and avoiding the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, the candidate demonstrates integrity and a commitment to ethical conduct. This aligns with the expectation that employees will handle confidential information responsibly and follow established procedures, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. An incorrect approach that involves sharing the requested information without proper authorization would constitute a breach of confidentiality. This is a direct violation of ethical standards and potentially company policy, which would likely have severe consequences, including disqualification from the hiring process and potential legal repercussions for unauthorized data disclosure. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating information to meet the request, demonstrates a lack of integrity and honesty. This not only misrepresents the candidate's capabilities, but also undermines the trust essential in any professional relationship. Such deception is ethically reprehensible and would lead to immediate disqualification. A third incorrect approach, such as ignoring the request entirely, fails to demonstrate proactive communication and problem-solving skills. While it avoids direct breaches, it signals an inability to manage challenging situations or to engage effectively with the hiring process, which is a critical aspect of professional assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies, ethical guidelines, and relevant data protection laws. When faced with a request that might compromise these principles, the professional should 1. Pause and assess the request against established rules and ethical standards. 2. Identify the potential risks and consequences of fulfilling or not fulfilling the request. 3. Seek clarification or guidance from appropriate internal resources, e.g., HR, legal department, through official channels. 4. Communicate transparently about any limitations or the need for adherence to procedures. 5. Prioritize integrity, confidentiality, and compliance above expediency. Question 17. Research into the ethical considerations of data handling during a hiring assessment. A candidate is asked to provide specific examples of client project outcomes that involved sensitive commercial data. The candidate is aware that sharing these details directly would violate confidentiality agreements. Option A. Offer to provide a high-level overview of project types and general success metrics, emphasizing the anonymized nature of the information, and ask the hiring manager if this level of detail is sufficient or if they require specific, anonymized case studies. Option B. Directly provide detailed client project outcomes, including specific names and sensitive data, to fully answer the question and demonstrate comprehensive understanding. Option C. Create hypothetical project outcomes that closely resemble real-world scenarios but do not contain any actual sensitive data. Option D. Refuse to provide any information about client projects, stating that all such information is confidential and cannot be shared under any circumstances. The correct answer is A. Offer to provide a high-level overview of project types and general success metrics, emphasizing the anonymized nature of the information, and ask the hiring manager if this level of detail is sufficient or if they require specific, anonymized case studies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect client confidentiality and data privacy. The pressure to provide a quick answer, especially in a competitive hiring context, can lead to shortcuts that violate these principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any information shared is done so appropriately and with the necessary consent or anonymization. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Sumitomo Denki Kogyo's internal policies and relevant data protection regulations. By seeking clarification from the hiring manager and offering to provide anonymized or aggregated data, the candidate demonstrates an understanding of the importance of confidentiality and responsible data handling. This aligns with ethical standards that require professionals to act with integrity and respect for privacy. An incorrect approach that involves directly sharing client-specific details without explicit consent would constitute a breach of client confidentiality, a serious ethical and potentially legal violation. This undermines trust and could lead to reputational damage for both the individual and Sumitomo Denki Kogyo. Another incorrect approach, such as refusing to provide any information whatsoever, might be perceived as uncooperative or lacking in transparency, potentially hindering the assessment process, even if it avoids a breach. However, it fails to demonstrate the ability to navigate information sharing responsibly. A third incorrect approach, which involves fabricating or misrepresenting data to avoid sharing sensitive information, is fundamentally dishonest and unethical, violating principles of integrity and accuracy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory constraints. This involves understanding what information is confidential, who has the right to access it, and what policies govern its disclosure. When faced with a request for sensitive information, the next step is to assess the nature of the request and the potential risks of disclosure. If disclosure is necessary, the professional should explore all permissible means of sharing, such as anonymization or aggregation, and always seek appropriate authorization. If there is any doubt, consulting with a supervisor or legal/compliance department is crucial. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only effective, but also ethically sound and legally compliant. Question 18. Performance analysis shows that a client's investment portfolio has not met their ambitious return expectations over the past year, leading to their expressed dissatisfaction. The client is now requesting a significant shift to higher risk, potentially higher return investments to catch up. As the financial advisor, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Recommend a portfolio of highly speculative and complex financial instruments that offer the potential for rapid gains, assuming the client's desire for high returns overrides other considerations. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and engage in a detailed discussion to recalibrate expectations and explore suitable adjustments to the investment strategy. Option C. Immediately implement a change to higher-risk investments as requested by the client to address their immediate desire for higher returns. Option D. Inform the client that their expectations are unrealistic and insist on maintaining the current investment strategy without any modifications. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and engage in a detailed discussion to recalibrate expectations and explore suitable adjustments to the investment strategy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in financial advisory roles, where a client's stated financial goals may conflict with their risk tolerance or the prevailing market conditions. The professional must navigate this discrepancy by applying a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes client well-being and regulatory compliance over immediate client satisfaction or the pursuit of potentially unrealistic returns. The challenge lies in balancing the client's aspirations with prudent financial advice, ensuring that recommendations are suitable, ethical, and aligned with regulatory expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough reassessment of the client's financial situation, risk profile, and objectives in light of the performance analysis. This requires engaging in a detailed discussion with the client to understand the underlying reasons for their dissatisfaction and to educate them on the realistic potential outcomes of their investment strategy. Best professional practice, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing financial advice, e.g., those overseen by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK or similar bodies in other jurisdictions, emphasizes the principle of suitability. This means that any investment recommendation must be appropriate for the client's individual circumstances, knowledge, experience, financial situation, and investment objectives. The correct approach demonstrates adherence to this principle by seeking to align the client's expectations with achievable and suitable strategies, potentially involving a revised investment plan or a more realistic discussion of timelines and returns. It upholds ethical duties of care and loyalty to the client. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately agreeing to alter the investment strategy to chase higher returns without a comprehensive review. This would be a failure of the suitability requirement, as it prioritizes a potentially unachievable client desire over a prudent assessment of risk and reward, could lead to recommendations that are not in the client's best interest and expose them to undue risk, violating regulatory obligations to act in the client's best interest and to provide suitable advice. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's concerns outright and insist on maintaining the current strategy without further dialogue. This demonstrates a lack of client engagement and a failure to address potential misunderstandings or evolving client needs. Ethically, it breaches the duty to communicate effectively and to consider the client's perspective. From a regulatory standpoint, it could be seen as a failure to adequately monitor the client's situation and to ensure ongoing suitability of the advice provided. A third incorrect approach might be to recommend complex or high-risk products solely to meet the client's stated desire for higher returns, without adequately assessing if the client understands or can tolerate the associated risks. This would be a direct contravention of suitability rules and potentially lead to mis-selling, a serious regulatory and ethical breach. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with active listening and understanding the client's concerns. This is followed by a data-driven assessment, in this case, the performance analysis, and a review of the client's profile against regulatory requirements for suitability. The next step is to communicate findings clearly and transparently to the client, explaining the rationale behind any recommendations. If a strategy needs adjustment, this should be done through a process that reestablishes suitability, considering all relevant factors. Continuous monitoring and open dialogue are crucial to ensure ongoing alignment between the client's evolving needs and the investment strategy. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that the current impact assessment framework for new product development projects lacks sufficient depth in evaluating potential environmental and social risks, leading to a higher likelihood of non-compliance with emerging sustainability regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings while ensuring future compliance and operational integrity? Option A. Update the existing impact assessment documentation to include generic statements about environmental and social considerations without altering the actual assessment procedures or training. Option B. Classify the audit findings as minor operational oversights and implement only superficial changes to the reporting templates, focusing primarily on expediting the product development timeline. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the existing impact assessment methodology, identify specific gaps in environmental and social risk evaluation, and develop targeted enhancements to the framework, including updated risk criteria and improved data collection protocols, followed by comprehensive training for relevant personnel. Option D. Immediately implement a new, sophisticated environmental and social impact assessment software solution across all product development teams, assuming it will automatically resolve the identified issues. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the existing impact assessment methodology, identify specific gaps in environmental and social risk evaluation, and develop targeted enhancements to the framework, including updated risk criteria and improved data collection protocols, followed by comprehensive training for relevant personnel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of robust risk management and compliance. The pressure to deliver results quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of impact assessments, potentially exposing Sumitomo Denki Kogyo to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and financial losses. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the impact assessment process, while efficient, remains thorough and aligned with the company's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the existing impact assessment framework, identifying specific areas for improvement that directly address the audit findings. This includes a detailed analysis of the methodology, data collection processes, and the integration of findings into strategic decision-making. This approach represents best professional practice because it is proactive, data-driven, and directly responsive to identified control weaknesses. It ensures that future impact assessments are more accurate, reliable, and effective in identifying and mitigating potential risks, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and fostering a culture of continuous improvement. This aligns with the principles of sound corporate governance and risk management expected of publicly traded companies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on updating documentation without addressing the underlying procedural deficiencies. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a false sense of compliance. While the documentation may appear improved, the actual impact assessment process remains flawed, leaving the company vulnerable to the same risks identified by the audit. This fails to meet the spirit of regulatory requirements, which emphasize effective implementation of controls, not just their superficial representation. Another incorrect approach involves prioritizing the implementation of new, complex assessment tools without a clear understanding of their applicability or the necessary training for personnel. This is professionally unsound, as it risks introducing new inefficiencies and potential errors into the assessment process. It neglects the fundamental need to first understand and rectify existing weaknesses before layering on potentially unproven or ill-suited solutions. This can lead to misallocation of resources and a failure to achieve the desired risk mitigation outcomes, potentially violating principles of prudent financial management and operational oversight. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the audit findings as minor or a result of isolated incidents, opting for minimal, superficial adjustments. This is a critical professional and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to risk management and regulatory adherence. Ignoring or downplaying audit findings can lead to systemic control weaknesses that, if left unaddressed, can result in significant breaches of regulations, substantial fines, and severe damage to the company's reputation. This approach directly contravenes the duty of care owed to stakeholders and the obligation to maintain a robust internal control environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first thoroughly understanding the scope and implications of the audit findings. This involves engaging with the auditors to clarify any ambiguities and assessing the root causes of the identified issues. The next step is to develop a structured remediation plan that prioritizes actions based on risk and impact. This plan should include clear objectives, timelines, assigned responsibilities, and metrics for measuring success. Regular communication with senior management and relevant stakeholders about the progress of the remediation efforts is crucial. Professionals must always consider the regulatory landscape, ethical obligations, and the company's risk appetite when making decisions, ensuring that actions taken are not only compliant but also contribute to the long-term sustainability and integrity of the organization. Question 20. Which approach would be most appropriate for Sumitomo Denki Kogyo to adopt when planning the introduction of advanced automation technologies into its manufacturing processes to ensure responsible implementation and minimize potential negative consequences? Option A. Implement the new automation without a formal assessment, addressing any issues that arise on a reactive basis after the technology is in operation. Option B. Proceed with the implementation based on the projected cost savings and efficiency improvements, assuming the technology's inherent safety and environmental compliance as stated by the vendor. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates potential operational, environmental, social, and economic consequences, involving relevant stakeholders and developing mitigation strategies. Option D. Focus the assessment solely on the immediate financial benefits and operational efficiencies, deferring consideration of broader societal or environmental impacts to a later stage. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates potential operational, environmental, social, and economic consequences, involving relevant stakeholders and developing mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent uncertainty and potential for significant disruption associated with a major operational change. Sumitomo Denki Kogyo, as a global manufacturing entity, must navigate the complexities of implementing new technology while ensuring compliance with relevant Japanese regulations and internal ethical guidelines. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and innovation with the responsibility to conduct thorough due diligence and mitigate potential negative impacts on stakeholders, including employees, the environment, and the broader community. A hasty or incomplete assessment could lead to unforeseen consequences, regulatory breaches, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and systematic impact assessment that proactively identifies, analyzes, and plans for the mitigation of potential negative consequences arising from the introduction of advanced automation. This aligns with principles of responsible innovation and corporate social responsibility, often implicitly or explicitly embedded in Japanese business ethics and regulatory expectations for large corporations. Such an assessment would typically involve cross-functional teams, stakeholder consultations, and the development of contingency plans. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to sustainable business practices and adherence to the spirit of regulations that promote safety, environmental protection, and fair labor practices. Even if not explicitly detailed in a single impact assessment law, it reflects a mature understanding of risk management and the long-term viability of the business. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new automation without a formal, structured impact assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This approach risks overlooking critical issues such as job displacement and the need for retraining, potential environmental impacts from new machinery or processes, or unforeseen safety hazards. Such an oversight could lead to violations of labor laws concerning employee welfare and consultation, environmental regulations regarding emissions or waste disposal, and general safety standards. Focusing solely on the immediate cost savings and efficiency gains, while ignoring broader societal and environmental implications, represents a narrow and potentially unethical business perspective. Short-sightedness can lead to significant reputational damage and may contravene the broader expectations of corporate governance and social responsibility that are increasingly emphasized in Japanese business culture and regulatory oversight. It fails to consider the interconnectedness of business operations with the wider ecosystem. Relying exclusively on vendor assurances regarding the technology's safety and environmental friendliness without independent verification or internal assessment is also professionally deficient. Vendors have a vested interest in selling their products, and their assessments may not be as rigorous or comprehensive as required by the adopting company's specific operational context and regulatory obligations. This can lead to a false sense of security and potential noncompliance with Japanese industrial safety standards or environmental protection laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Sumitomo Denki Kogyo should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to impact assessment. This involves defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all potential stakeholders and their concerns, systematically evaluating potential positive and negative impacts across operational, environmental, social, and economic dimensions, and developing clear mitigation and contingency plans. The process should be iterative, allowing for adjustments as new information emerges. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and the long-term sustainability of the company and its stakeholders. This involves seeking expert advice, engaging in open communication, and prioritizing responsible innovation over expediency.